He fell in love with his roommate, but what happened next? Come with me, let's find out together. Hey friends, welcome to another mind-blowing movie featuring your amazing actress and actor. I know you don't want to miss out on this one, because it's not only entertaining but also educative and full of life drama. But before we dive in, why don't you subscribe for more captivating movies from us? The story begins with a young lady and a young man, Maria and Dan, who were seen jogging together, chatting along the way until they got home. While relaxing, the alarm rang, and they both rushed upstairs to get ready for work. A few minutes later, Dan was already set as he called out for Maria, who came downstairs dressed like a guy. Dan admired her outfit, and shortly after, they both left. Later that afternoon, Maria was walking back home when Dan almost hit her playfully. He asked why she didn't wait for him, but she replied that she couldn't waste her time waiting while his department liked gossiping. After that, they both left, still chatting. Back at home, they sat down to eat while watching a movie, laughing together. That same night, they both fell asleep on the couch. The following day, Dan was in the living room playing a game on his phone when Maria came in with her laptop, asking for help. Dan refused, making Maria ask why it was so hard for him to help her. Instead, he preferred helping people in his department, including the new girl. This made Maria upset, so Dan later agreed to help her, but only if she would help him get information on how to talk to the new girl. The next day, Dan picked Maria up again while she was walking home. They chatted along the way, still arguing about who was going to cook. The following afternoon, Maria was lying on the couch when Dan came down excitedly to tell her he had a dinner date with the new girl. Maria was happy for him. Dan then went upstairs while she continued her nap. The next day, Maria was in the living room looking for Dan so they could watch their movie together. Just then, Dan rushed in, clearly in a hurry. Maria was surprised until he reminded her he had a date with Rose, the new girl. That was when she remembered, and he left. The following day, Maria was stuck with her assignment and called out for Dan, but he was busy on the phone with Rose, laughing as he went upstairs. Maria followed him, clearly unhappy. A day later, Dan went to Maria's room in the morning. She quickly told him she wasn't making breakfast. He replied that it was fine since he and Rose were having brunch. He only wanted to ask what he could get for her since she was also a lady, but she had no idea what to say. Later that day, Dan got dressed and asked Maria how he looked. She simply said, "Good." He was surprised it was just good, but ignored it. He then told her that if Rose agreed to date him, he would buy Maria dinner. Immediately, Maria stood up excitedly and assured him she would pray for that to happen. Dan left happily. That night, when he returned, Maria was asleep on the couch. He woke her up and at first pretended Rose had rejected him. But then he broke the news that Rose was now his girlfriend. Maria was excited for him, though more concerned about the dinner he promised. Dan got a bit upset and went upstairs. The next morning, Maria smelled something nice from the kitchen. To her surprise, it was Rose cooking. From the look on Maria's face, Dan already knew she wasn't happy. He followed her outside to explain, but Maria argued with him and went upstairs. The following day, Maria was about to leave for work but discovered Dan had already left. That night, Maria stood by the roadside, hoping Dan would come to pick her up, but he didn't. The next night, Dan came home and found an apology note on the couch. Maria later came to apologize properly, and they went back to their friendship. One evening, Maria arrived home looking so tired as she complained about her manager. Dan went to the kitchen to make her dinner, which surprised her because it was her turn to cook. However, Dan informed her that Rose would be spending the weekend with him since she was having issues with her roommate. Maria immediately declined and walked out, with Dan pleading after her. A day later, Dan brought Rose to the house, shocking Maria as he helped Rose with her box upstairs. Dan came back down to explain. Though Maria was upset, he was able to make her smile. The next morning, they all prepared for work. Dan showered praises on Rose, not even noticing Maria like he used to. Maria quietly went outside to wait for them. 2 days later, Maria entered the kitchen and found her things misplaced. She was surprised and waited until they arrived. When she asked who had done it, Rose admitted it, and they almost got into an argument. 2 days later, Maria, went jogging alone. When she returned home tired, she called out Dan's name but got no response. Checking her phone, she discovered a message saying he had already left with Rose. That night, Maria waited for him, but he didn't return early. Later that night, Dan and Rose finally came back. As they chatted, Dan remembered his movie night with Maria. Even though Rose tried to distract him, he still went upstairs to call Maria. But Maria was upset and ignored him. But here's the question. Was Maria just upset with Dan, or was she secretly falling for him all along? The following day, Dan and Rose were watching a movie in the living room, which he practically wasn't enjoying. When Maria saw them, she quickly went back to the kitchen. Dan called her back, asking her to join them, but she refused, saying she had work to do. That made Rose jealous, but Dan told her that Maria was just like a brother to him. Those words hurt Maria deeply. She went inside, feeling rejected, and stood in front of the mirror holding a dress, staring at herself. Hours later, Maria went to a bar to have a drink and clear her head. There she met a guy who was busy making a video, dressed and acting like a female. Moments later, he sat with Maria and she poured out her pain to him. He decided to help her. The next afternoon, Maria was in the living room reading a book when there was a knock at the door. She opened it and was surprised to see Collins, the guy she met at the bar. He told her to go upstairs and change so they could go out. While she left, Collins pulled out his phone and started making a video in the apartment. The next day, Collins was in Maria's room as they discussed. He told her that she was in love with Dan, but Maria denied it, insisting she only missed their friendship. The following day, Maria and Collins were seen chatting when a lady named Brenda walked in. Maria was shocked, but Brenda told her she had a lot of work to do. They later sat and talked. 2 days later, Collins and Brenda were sitting together when Maria came down to show them her dress. But they were surprised by what she was wearing. As a girl, they told her it wasn't okay, making her return it immediately. The next day, Dan was in the living room watching a movie when Rose came to ask what they would have for lunch. Dan told her to go to the kitchen since there was spaghetti in the freezer, but she refused and insisted they go out to eat. Though he didn't want to, Rose forced him. Before leaving, Dan tried to check on Maria, but she wasn't around. He was surprised at where she had been going these days. That same day, Dan and Rose returned and met Maria at home. Rose went upstairs to freshen up, leaving Dan and Maria to talk. While chatting, there was a knock at the door. Maria opened it, and to her delight, it was Collins. They greeted each other excitedly, and Maria introduced him to Dan. Then, Maria and Collins went upstairs. That night, Dan was still in the living room when Rose came to ask him to come to bed with her. He insisted she should go first, that he would join her later. Deep down, Dan wasn't comfortable with the way Maria had been acting. The next day, Collins gave Maria a dress that Brenda had bought for her and asked her to wear it. Though she found it difficult, she eventually agreed. Moments later, Collins walked her downstairs, praising her beauty. Dan was shocked and asked where she was going. Maria told him they were heading to a party, which made him even more curious. The next morning, Rose received an emergency call that her mother was sick, so she rushed to her family house. Later that day, Maria returned from work and Dan went to her room to ask why she didn't wait for him to pick her up. She told him not to worry because Collins had already promised to be picking her up. The next day, Dan followed Maria closely, wanting to know what was going on. Maria told him to find out more about Collins for himself. The following day, Collins came around. Dan tried to engage him in conversation, but Collins ignored him and walked straight to Maria's room. Maria then told Collins they needed to put an end to everything because it was beginning to affect Dan. But Collins insisted that things would only end when he decided. Later that evening, Maria and Collins came back home with wine. They sat to drink together, but Dan joined them, trying to talk to Maria. Collins tried to stop them from being close, but eventually he left, giving them space. The next afternoon, Maria and Dan were seen having a good time together when Rose arrived unannounced. She was upset by what she saw and went into her room to pack her things. Dan tried to explain, but she left angrily. Afterward, both Dan and Maria hugged each other. The moral lesson of this movie is, never let jealousy pride or outside influence destroy true friendship, because sometimes what you're searching for in others is right beside you all along. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button for more fascinating movies from us.